In a secluded country house, Max, a once gentle therapy dog, suddenly growled and lunged at an autistic child's bed. The mother, horrified and fearing for her son's safety, furiously tried to pull him away. But the dog's instinct was not aggression, but a deadly warning that the humans couldn't perceive. Clara's heart plummeted into her stomach. Max's deep growl reverberated through the night's silence, a guttural, primal sound she had never heard from her gentle companion. His eyes, once full of sweetness, now gleamed with a wild intensity, fixed on something Clara couldn't discern. But Max's body was on Leo, and that was all that mattered. "Max, no! What are you doing?" she shrieked, her voice choked with panic. Her arms instinctively reached out, trying to pull the dog away. Max, however, was like a statue of tense muscles, unyielding. He wasn't biting Leo, but his front paws were firmly planted on the mattress and his sturdy body pressed down on the child who, to Clara's horror, remained motionless, perhaps still in a deep sleep, perhaps paralyzed by fright or the sensory overload the situation generated. Clara's mind spun in a spiral. Max, her Max, the dog trained to calm, to protect, was attacking her most vulnerable child. A wave of pure adrenaline propelled her. She grabbed Max's thick fur with both hands, pulling with all her might. Get off him now!" she shrieked, her voice tearing her throat. Max resisted, a dead and living weight all at once. He didn't turn to her, didn't react to her fury. His eyes remained fixed on the wall behind the headboard, where a heavy velvet curtain, dark and old, hung, almost touching the floor. He scratched the mattress with his hind paws, trying to gain leverage, not to bite Leo, but to reach something beyond him, behind him. His growl diminished to a low, urgent whimper, a sound of desperation. Clara, blinded by fear and misunderstanding, interpreted this as stubbornness, as the fury of an uncontrolled animal. She slapped Max hard on his flank, something she never in her life thought she would do. "Max, please, you're hurting him," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. The dog let out a yelp, but didn't retreat. Instead, with renewed strength and a growl that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, he lunged one last time. There was a dry, tearing sound. The velvet curtain, held by an old, rusty hook, gave way under the weight and force of Max's lunge. The heavy fabric ripped, detaching from the wall with a jarring noise and revealing what lay behind. It wasn't just a wall. It was a small recess, a narrow, dark space that the curtain had always concealed. And there, exposed in the dim lamplight, was a thin, grey, dusty metal pipe. A pipe Clara had never noticed, that had always been hidden. An almost inaudible hiss filled the air. A subtle, sweet, nauseating smell, which she had attributed to the old house's mold, suddenly became unmistakable, overwhelming. Gas. Clara froze. Max's growl ceased abruptly, replaced by a low, trembling whimper. The dog, now free of the curtain, looked at the exposed pipe, then at Leo, and finally at Clara, his eyes filled with deep sadness, a relief mixed with dread. Understanding hit her like a lightning bolt. It wasn't an attack. It never had been an attack. Max wasn't trying to hurt Leo. He was trying to save him. The gas pipe, the hiss, the smell, everything fit into a macabre puzzle. The danger wasn't Max. The danger was invisible, silent. And it was there, right beside her son's head, threatening Leo's life with every breath. The terror she had felt for Max transformed into a chilling, overwhelming horror at the real threat, now exposed in all its silent, lethal clarity. Clara felt the air thin in her lungs, not from lack of oxygen, but from the shock that paralyzed her. The hiss of the gas, once an almost imperceptible murmur, now seemed to scream in her ears, a lethal, constant sound. The sweet, nauseating smell, which she had ignored for days, attributing it to the house's age, was now irrefutable proof of an invisible threat infiltrating every crevice, every breath. Her eyes, wide with terror, fixed on the metal pipe, It was thin, rusty in places, and seemed to have been poorly installed or damaged. A tiny crack, almost invisible to the naked eye, but revealed by the almost imperceptible mist of escaping gas, right there, inches from Leo's head. Chilling horror enveloped her, replacing the initial fury and panic with an overwhelming sense of helplessness. "Gas," she whispered, the word dying in her throat, a faint, hoarse sound. Guilt hit her like a punch to the gut. Max. Her Max. The dog she had attacked, cursed in her despair, was there panting, his eyes still fixed on the pipe, then on Leo, and finally on Clara. There was no anger in his gaze, only deep exhaustion and silent concern. He had tried to warn her, had fought against her to save her son, and she, in her blindness, had almost stopped him. The image of the slap she had given his flank burned in her mind, a heavy burden on her conscience. "Oh, Max, my God, Max," she murmured, tears streaming freely, but now they were tears of remorse and terror. She knelt beside the bed, her hand trembling as she touched Leo's face. He was still motionless, eyes closed, breathing shallowly. Clara's heart leaped. Was he sleeping? Or had the gas already affected him? Her mind screamed with the most terrible possibilities, each more frightening than the last. "Leo, son, are you okay?" she called, her voice choked, almost a desperate whisper. There was no answer. The smell of gas was growing stronger, denser. Every second was precious. She needed to act, but panic immobilized her. What to do? Turn off the gas? Where was the main valve? The house was old, and she didn't know the system well. Clara's mind was a whirlwind of unanswered questions. Max, as if sensing her paralysis, let out a low whimper and nudged his nose against Clara's hand, which was still on Leo's face. It was a gesture of urgency, of do something. Clara took a deep breath, trying to push away the fog of terror that clouded her judgment. First, air. She stumbled to her feet, ran to the nearest window and shoved it open violently. The cold night air rushed into the room, mixing with the sweet smell, but not dissipating it immediately. The icy breeze was a small relief, but not enough. "I need to get him out of here," she thought, her voice in her head sounding distant, like an echo. She returned to the bed, her eyes fixed on Leo. He was small, but the body of an autistic child in deep sleep could be surprisingly heavy. She couldn't just pull him. Carefully, she picked him up in her arms, feeling the warmth of his body, the fragility of his life in her hands. Every movement was slow, deliberate, fearing to hurt him or wake him abruptly. Max, who had been following her with his eyes, let out a low, urgent bark, pointing his muzzle towards the door. He knew, he always knew. "Yes, Max, yes, out," she said, her voice still trembling, but with a new determination. As she turned to leave the room with Leo in her arms, her eyes fell again on the exposed pipe. The hiss continued, relentless, a macabre soundtrack to her despair. She needed to call for help, but the phone was in the kitchen downstairs, and Leo needed fresh air immediately. She clutched her son to her chest, feeling the weight of her responsibility, the terror of having almost lost everything to an invisible threat and her own misunderstanding. Max, faithful and vigilant, followed closely, his steps soft, but his presence now a beacon of hope and a painful reminder of her failure. The chapter had turned, and the danger, though revealed, was far from over. The race against time had only just begun. Clara clutched Leo to her chest, feeling the fragile warmth of her son's body. The hiss of the gas in the room seemed to pursue her, a ghostly sound that mingled with the frantic beat of her own heart. Max, with a low, urgent bark, was already at the bedroom door, looking back at her, and then at the dark hallway as if hurrying her along. "Yes, Max, yes. Out," she murmured, her voice still choked, but with a new and desperate determination. She spun on her heels, her eyes fixed on the door, avoiding looking again at the exposed pipe, at the tiny crack that now seemed like an abyss. The image of the invisible danger, so close to Leo, burned in her mind. Clara's steps were quick and uncertain as she hurried through the hallway. The old house, which once seemed a refuge, was now a trap. Every creak of the floorboards beneath her feet was a reminder of the fragility of everything. Max followed closely, his body brushing against her legs, a constant presence, a beacon in the darkness of panic. The staircase seemed endless. The wooden steps, worn by time, groaned under her weight. Clara descended cautiously, one arm firmly on the banister, the other cradling Leo. "Hold on, my love," she whispered to her son. Though she knew he probably didn't hear her or didn't understand her, Leo's breathing was shallow and he remained inert in her arms, a precious and terrifying weight. The smell of gas, though fainter outside the room, still hung in the air, a constant reminder of the threat. Finally, she reached the ground floor. The living room was dark, lit only by the faint moonlight streaming through the windows. She didn't stop. Her goal was the kitchen, where the landline phone was, the only means of communication in that isolated area. In the kitchen, Clara flicked on the lights frantically. The sudden brightness made her eyes ache, but she didn't care. Carefully, she laid Leo on the sofa in the small, adjacent dining room. Covering him with a blanket she grabbed in haste. He still wasn't moving, and Clara's heart tightened. She knelt beside him, her hand trembling as she touched his forehead. It was warm, but not feverish. She watched his breathing, trying to discern any sign of difficulty. "Leo, son, can you hear me?" She tried again, her voice almost a whisper. No response. His paralysis, which she had previously attributed to his autism, now terrified her with the possibility of it being an effect of the gas. Max sat beside the sofa, his muzzle resting on his paws, his eyes fixed on Leo. His gaze was one of concern, of vigilance. Clara felt a pang of guilt so strong it almost made her cry again. She had hit him, yelled at him, thinking he was a threat, when in fact he was the only one who had perceived the danger. "I'm so sorry, Max," she whispered, her voice choked. The dog just looked at her, without anger, without resentment, just with a silent understanding. Clara stood up, stumbling towards the phone. Her hands trembled so much she could barely dial the emergency number. Each ring seemed to take an eternity. "Emergency? What's your emergency?" A calm, professional voice answered. "Gas! Gas leak! In my country house!" Clara shrieked, her voice hysterical, almost unintelligible. My son is here. He's not responding." "Ma'am, please calm down. What's your address?" The voice on the other end asked, with a patience Clara couldn't imitate. She gave the address, the remote location of the house, the landmarks. As she spoke, her eyes returned to Leo, lying on the sofa, and to Max, whose gaze never left him. "We're sending a team immediately, ma'am. Please leave the house. Go to a safe place, outdoors, and wait for them. Don't light anything. Don't use electricity if you can avoid it. And stay calm." "But my son," Clara began, her voice failing. "The emergency team is on its way, ma'am. They are trained for this. The most important thing now is your safety and your son's. Get out of the house." Clara hung up the phone, the receiver slipping from her sweaty hands. Get out of the house. That's what she needed to do. But how? Carry Leo again. And Max. "Max, let's go," she said, her voice firmer now, driven by adrenaline and the clear instruction. She bent down to pick up Leo again, but before she could, Max let out a sharp bark, a sound different from the previous ones. He ran to the kitchen door, scratching at it with his paws, then looked at Clara, his eyes pleading. The door, the back door, it was the closest, the quickest way out. Clara picked Leo up in her arms once more, his weight a mixture of love and terror. Max ran ahead, leading the way, as if he knew exactly what to do. She followed him, her bare feet on the cold kitchen floor, the icy night air rushing into the house as Max pushed the door open with his muzzle. The fresh air hit her face like a balm, but the smell of gas still seemed to cling to her nostrils. She ran to the garden, away from the house, into the open air, to safety. Outside, under the starry sky and the night silence, she collapsed onto the damp grass, holding Leo tightly. Max lay down beside them, panting but vigilant. The race against time had begun, but the first battle, escaping immediate danger, had been won. Thanks to Max, Clara looked at the dog, tears streaming again, but this time they were tears of gratitude and overwhelming love. The danger was still there, but they were out, and now it was a matter of waiting and praying that Leo would be okay. Clara collapsed onto the damp grass, Leo's body nestled against hers, a fragile shield against the terror that still enveloped her. The cold night air kissed her sweaty skin, but couldn't dissipate the feverish heat of panic burning in her veins. Max lay beside them, panting but vigilant, his dark eyes fixed on her son, then on the dark house, and finally on Clara, like a silent guardian. "Leo, my love," she whispered, her voice hoarse, almost inaudible. She held him tighter, feeling the faint warmth of his body, the shallow breathing that barely moved his chest. The absence of any response, any movement, was a torment. Was he just sleeping deeply, or had the gas already done its damage? The question echoed in her mind, a silent scream that threatened to tear her sanity. She touched his face, then his neck, searching for a pulse. It was weak, but it was there, a thread of hope in a sea of despair. Her tear-filled eyes turned to Max. The dog, who moments before had been the target of her blind fury, was now the embodiment of loyalty and salvation. The image of her raised hand, of the blow she had struck, of the yelp of pain he had let out, burned in her memory. "I'm so sorry, Max," she murmured again, tears streaming freely, wetting Leo's hair. "I'm truly sorry. I didn't know. I was so foolish." Max merely looked at her, without a hint of accusation in his brown eyes. He gently nudged his muzzle against Clara's hand, a gesture of comfort that broke her heart even more. How could he be so forgiving? How could she have doubted him, his instinct, his love for Leo? He was a therapy dog, trained to protect, to sense. And she, the mother, the protector, had miserably failed to see the danger, to trust her own dog. The sweet smell of gas still lingered in the air, a ghostly reminder of what had almost happened. The house, once a sanctuary, now seemed a silent monster, its dark windows like empty eyes. The night was cold, and the damp grass began to chill her clothes. Clara tried to move, to adjust Leo in her arms to protect him from the cold. But each movement was slow, heavy, as if her body were made of lead. "They're coming, my love," she whispered to Leo, more to herself than to him. "Help is on the way. You're going to be okay. You have to be okay." She hugged him with all the strength she had, trying to transfer her own warmth to her son's inert body. The silence of the night was oppressive, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant sound of some nocturnal animal. Every shadow seemed to move, every noise made her jump. Max, as if sensing her anxiety, let out a low whimper and drew closer, resting his head on Clara's thigh. His presence was an anchor, a point of sanity amidst the chaos of her emotions. She stroked his head, feeling the softness of his fur, the solidity of his body. "You're my hero, Max," she said, her voice choked with gratitude. "You saved Leo. You saved us." The minutes dragged like hours, each one a torment. Clara gazed at the dark road, waiting, praying for any sign of light, any sound of an engine. Despair threatened to consume her, but the need to protect Leo, to keep him safe, prevented her from giving in completely. She continued to check his breathing, his pulse, looking for any change, however small. Suddenly, a sound, distant, almost inaudible at first, but unmistakable. A siren. Clara lifted her head, her heart leaping with hope and relief. "They're coming!" she exclaimed, her voice choked. Max also pricked up his ears, a low bark escaping his throat. The faint light of headlights began to appear on the horizon, cutting through the darkness of the rural road. Help was finally arriving. The race against time wasn't over yet, but hope, once so tenuous, now shone a little brighter in the night's gloom. The siren, once a distant wail, now tore through the night's silence with a deafening urgency. The blue and red lights of the emergency vehicles danced in the darkness, painting the trees and the house with intermittent flashes like a dramatic omen. Clara rose slightly, shielding Leo with her body, while Max let out a stronger bark, a mix of alert and relief. 2 fire trucks and an ambulance pulled up to the property's entrance, kicking up a cloud of dust on the dirt road. Doors opened, and uniformed figures, equipped with flashlights and radios, quickly disembarked. One of the firefighters, a tall, robust man in a helmet, shone a flashlight on Clara and Leo, who were huddled on the grass. "Ma'am, is everything all right? Where's the child?" he shouted, his voice muffled by the helmet and the still pulsing siren. Clara tried to answer, but her voice failed. She just pointed to Leo in her arms, tears streaming again. But now they were tears of such intense relief that it almost choked her. 2 paramedics, a man and a woman, rushed towards them, their first aid bags swinging. The woman, with a kind face and firm eyes, knelt beside Clara. "I'm Nurse Anna. We can help, ma'am. What's your son's name?" "Leo." "It's Leo," Clara managed to whisper. Her voice choked. He's not responding. The gas, the leak." Anna quickly assessed Leo, her experienced fingers checking his pulse, his breathing. The man, paramedic Marcos, was already opening his bag, preparing an oxygen mask. Max, though vigilant, allowed them to approach, his eyes fixed on Leo, then on Clara, as if seeking permission. "Weak pulse? Shallow breathing?" Anna murmured to Marcos. "Let's get him on oxygen immediately." With coordinated and gentle movements, they took Leo from Clara's arms. Leo's body seemed even smaller and more fragile in the paramedic's hands. Clara felt an immediate emptiness, a sharp pain at the separation, but the professional confidence on their faces calmed her somewhat. They carefully laid him on a stretcher that Marcos had quickly assembled. "Ma'am, we need to take him to the ambulance for a more complete assessment," Anna said, as she placed the oxygen mask on Leo's face. "He inhaled gas, but we need to see how much it affected his system." Clara stood up, stumbling, her body aching and trembling. Max remained by her side, a silent support. She followed the stretcher, her eyes fixed on Leo, who was now receiving oxygen, his shallow breathing seeming a little less strained. As Marcos and Anna carried Leo to the ambulance, the firefighter who had spoken first approached Clara. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Rocha. Are you and your dog okay?" Clara nodded, unable to speak. She looked at Max, then at the sergeant. He saved us. He sensed the gas. I hit him," she confessed, guilt gnawing at her again. Sergeant Rocha looked at Max, who was sitting calmly beside Clara. "Dogs are incredible, ma'am. They have a much keener sense of smell than we do. Don't blame yourself. The important thing is that you're safe now." Inside the ambulance, Anna and Marcos worked quickly, connecting monitors to Leo, checking his vital signs. Clara sat in the small chair, observing every movement, every reading on the devices. The soft beep of the heart monitor was the most comforting melody she had ever heard. "His vital signs are stabilizing a bit with the oxygen," Anna informed with a reassuring smile. "He's still unconscious, but that's common in inhalation cases. We'll take him to the hospital for further tests and to ensure there's no long-term damage." Clara held Leo's small hand, which was cold, but now seemed to have a little more color. She leaned in and kissed his forehead. "You're going to be okay, my love. You're going to be okay." Outside, the firefighters were already at work, cordoning off the area and preparing to enter the house and shut off the gas leak. The light from the headlights and flashlights illuminated the scene, transforming the dark night into a stage of action and hope. Max, who had been prevented from entering the ambulance, sat near the door, his muzzle raised, his eyes fixed on Clara and Leo. He was the guardian, the silent hero, and his presence there, even from outside, was an invaluable comfort. The ambulance was preparing to leave. Clara looked at Max through the window. "I'll come back for you, Max," she promised, her voice choked. "I promise." As the ambulance sped down the dark road, carrying Leo towards the hope of the hospital, Clara felt a new wave of emotions. The terror was still there, but now it was accompanied by deep gratitude and renewed determination. The battle for Leo's life wasn't over yet, but the first and most dangerous phase had been overcome. And everything, absolutely everything, thanks to a dog. The ambulance tore through the night's darkness, its sirens wailing an urgent lament that echoed through the trees and fields. Inside, Clara's world narrowed to the cramped space and the focused faces of Anna and Marcos, who worked tirelessly on Leo. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was a sound both reassuring and terrifying, a constant reminder of the fragility of her son's life. Clara held Leo's small hand, which was still cold, but now seemed to have a slightly pinker color. Her eyes didn't leave her son's pale face. The oxygen mask covering his mouth and nose, the almost imperceptible movement of his chest. Every curve in the road, every bump, was a pang of anxiety. "His vital signs are more stable, Clara," Anna said without taking her eyes off the monitors, but with a tone of voice meant to reassure her. "He's responding to the oxygen. It's a good sign." Clara merely nodded, unable to speak. Words were lost in her throat, choked by a mix of fear and gratitude. Gratitude for Anna and Marcos, for Max, for every second Leo continued to breathe. The image of the exposed gas pipe, the torn curtain, the blind fury that had overcome her, returned to haunt her. "I almost lost him," she whispered more to herself than to the paramedics. "I was so blind I hit him. Max." Marcos, who was adjusting one of the cables, looked at her with compassion. "In panic situations, people act on instinct, ma'am. The important thing is that your son is getting help now, and the dog. He did what he had to do." Marcos's words didn't lessen the guilt, but offered a small comfort. Max. Where was Max now? Alone in the house, or with the firefighters? The promise she had made to him, that she would return, echoed in her mind. He was part of the family, a hero, and she had left him behind. The ambulance sped up, and the city lights began to appear on the horizon, a bright blur in the darkness. The hospital. Hope. "We're arriving," Anna announced, preparing for their arrival. The vehicle stopped abruptly at the hospital's emergency entrance, its sirens finally silencing, leaving a ghostly hum in Clara's ears. Doors opened, and a team of nurses and doctors was already waiting, with stretchers and equipment ready. Gas inhalation victim child, approximately 6 years old. Weak pulse, shallow breathing, unconscious, but stabilized with oxygen, Anna reported quickly as Leo was transferred to the hospital stretcher. Clara was gently pushed aside, watching as a flurry of professionals in white and blue surrounded Leo. Her son, so small and vulnerable, was now the center of an urgent medical choreography. She tried to follow, but a nurse gently stopped her. "Ma'am, please wait here. We'll take care of him. We need space to work," the nurse said, pointing to a waiting area. Clara felt helpless, a mere spectator. The emergency room corridor was a whirlwind of fluorescent lights, muffled voices, and the smell of disinfectant. She sat in one of the plastic chairs, her hands trembling, her body exhausted. The silence, after the siren's blare, was deafening. What would happen now? Would Leo be okay? Would there be long-term effects? Questions tumbled over each other in her mind, each more terrifying than the last. She closed her eyes, trying to push away the images of what had happened, but they persisted. Leo's face, the gas pipe, Max's eyes. She picked up her cell phone, her hand still trembling, and tried to call someone. But who? Her husband was on a business trip hundreds of kilometers away. Her parents lived in another state. She was alone, completely alone, with her son's life at stake. Minutes dragged on, turning into an eternity. Every door that opened, every voice that approached, made her heart race. She looked at the clock on the wall, but time seemed to have stopped. Finally, a doctor, a middle-aged man with glasses and a serious demeanor, approached her. "Mrs. Clara?" he asked, his voice calm, but laden with a gravity that made Clara's stomach churn. She stood up abruptly. "Yes, that's me. How is Leo? Is he okay?" The doctor gestured for her to sit down again. "I'm Dr. Mendez. Leo is stable. We've intubated him to ensure his lungs receive enough oxygen and to protect him from any secondary inhalation. He's being closely monitored in the pediatric ICU. Clara felt a knot in her throat. Intubated, ICU. The words were like blows. He's going to be okay. It's too early to say for sure, Mrs. Clara, Dr. Mendez replied, with a frankness that, though painful, was necessary. Gas inhalation can have variable effects. We need to monitor him over the next 24 to 48 hours to assess the extent of any damage to his lungs and nervous system. But he's receiving the best possible treatment." Clara merely nodded, tears streaming again, but now they were tears of deep pain and uncertainty. She wanted to be with him, hold him, whisper words of comfort. But he was there, somewhere behind those doors, fighting for his life, and she was here, helpless. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Soon, Mom. As soon as he's fully settled and the team has completed their initial assessments, we'll prepare you for the visit. In the meantime, try to get some rest. You've been through a great shock." Rest. How could she rest? Her son was in an ICU, intubated, and Max, her savior, was God knows where. The battle for Leo's life had entered a new phase, a phase of agonizing waiting, where the only thing Clara could do was pray and wait. Clara felt the ground give way beneath her feet. Intubated. ICU. The words echoed in her mind like sentences, each syllable a hammer against her already fragile heart. She tried to process what Dr. Mendez was saying, but her mind was clouded, the images of what had happened mixing with her son's uncertain future. He's going to be okay," she repeated, her voice choked, the question more a desperate plea than a search for information. Dr. Mendez, sensing her shock, gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're doing everything we can, Mrs. Clara. It's a delicate situation, but he's under the best care. Intubation is a preventive measure to ensure oxygenation and protect the airways. We need time for his lungs to recover and to monitor for any neurological effects." Time. It was the one thing she didn't have. Every second away from Leo was torture. She nodded, tears streaming freely now, but without sobs, just a silent flow of pain. The guilt of having hit Max, of having doubted him, of having been so blind, weighed like an anchor on her soul. Max, the hero, the savior, was far away, and she was here, useless, unable to protect her own son. She picked up her cell phone again, her fingers trembling. Speed dial for her husband. It rang, and went to voicemail. "Tiago, it's me," she began, her voice a hoarse whisper. "It's Leo. He's in the hospital, gas inhalation. He's in the ICU. Please call me as soon as you can. I need you." She hung up, feeling even more alone. Her parents? too far away to arrive in time for anything. The smell of disinfectant, the distant murmur of voices, the intermittent beep of some machine in another corridor, everything blended into a symphony of anguish. She watched the automatic doors of the emergency room open and close, revealing worried faces, some relieved, others in despair. Each time a nurse passed, Clara looked up, hoping for news, for permission to see her son. Finally, a nurse approached. "Mrs. Clara, Dr. Mendez has authorized your visit. He's in the pediatric ICU. I need you to put on this gown, mask, and gloves, please." Clara stood up, her legs shaky, but a new wave of determination propelled her. She put on the protective gear, her hands still trembling, but now with a purpose. The nurse guided her through a labyrinth of corridors, the silence growing denser as they approached the ICU. The door opened to an environment of soft lights, machine sounds, and the solemn quiet of children fighting for their lives. Clara's heart tightened. "He's in bed 3, the nurse whispered, pointing. Clara walked slowly, each step an eternity, and then she saw him. Leo, her small, vibrant Leo. Now, a tangle of tubes and wires seemed to engulf his fragile body. A tube ran down his throat, connected to a ventilator that breathed for him. Monitors flashed with numbers and graphs, and an infusion pump dripped medication into his veins. His face was pale, his eyes closed, and the oxygen mask she had seen in the ambulance had been replaced by something more invasive, more terrifying. "Leo," she whispered, her voice choked, tears streaming behind her mask. She approached the bed, reaching out to touch his hand, which was cold and limp. "My love, I'm here." The rhythmic sound of the machines was the only melody in the room, a song of artificial life. Clara leaned in, kissing Leo's forehead with the delicacy of a feather. "You are strong. I know you are strong." She felt a searing pain in her chest, a mix of overwhelming love and despair. She wanted to pick him up, hug him, take him out of there, but all she could do was hold his hand and pray. "I'm so sorry, my son," she murmured, guilt gnawing at her. "I'm so sorry for having been so blind, for not having protected you, for having hit Max." The image of Max, the silent hero, returned to her mind. He had done what she couldn't. He had seen the danger when she was blind. Clara remained there, watching every movement of the monitors, every small vibration in Leo's chest. It was a battle, and he was fighting, and she would be by his side every step of the way, every breath. The nurse approached again, indicating that visiting time was ending. Clara kissed Leo's hand once more, a silent promise on her lips. Upon leaving the ICU, the corridor seemed even colder and emptier. The reality of Leo intubated in the pediatric ICU was an overwhelming weight. The battle for Leo's life had entered a new phase, a phase of agonizing waiting, where the only thing Clara could do was pray, wait, and fight against the guilt that consumed her. She needed to be strong for Leo and for Max, who was waiting for her somewhere, a forgotten hero, but never forgiven by her. Clara removed the gown, mask, and gloves, discarding them in a hospital waste bin. Her hands trembled, and the smell of disinfectant seemed to cling to her skin. The silence of the corridor, after the constant hum of the ICU, was almost deafening, punctuated only by the occasional shuffle of shoes or the distant murmur of voices. She returned to the waiting room, which now seemed even more desolate. The plastic chairs, once a temporary refuge, were now a reminder of her helplessness. She sat down, sinking into the chair, her body heavy with exhaustion, but her mind in a whirlwind. The image of Leo, so small and fragile, connected to so many machines, was unbearable. Every tube, every wire, was a stab to her heart. And the guilt. Oh, the guilt! It gnawed at her from within, more painful than any physical wound. How could she have been so blind, so impulsive? Her cell phone vibrated in her hand. It was Tiago. His name flashed on the screen. A light in the darkness. She answered, her voice choked. "Tiago, thank God you called." On the other end of the line, Tiago's voice was a mix of sleep and panic. "Clara, what happened? I heard your message. Leo, gas, what's going on?" Clara tried to take a deep breath, but the air felt too thick. "It's Leo, Tiago. He inhaled gas, an exposed pipe behind his bedroom curtain. Max tried to warn us. He lunged at Leo, but he was actually trying to tear the curtain to show the pipe. I didn't understand, Tiago. I hit him. I pushed him away. I thought he was attacking our son." A heavy silence settled on the line, broken only by Clara's stifled sob. "He's in the pediatric ICU, Tiago. Intubated. The doctors say it's serious. They don't know if there will be long-term effects. I'm so scared." Tiago, on the other end, seemed to be processing the information, his voice now firmer, but still full of shock. "My God, Clara! Max, he did that? Where is he now?" "I don't know, Tiago. In the confusion with the ambulance, Anna. He must have run off. I hurt him, Tiago. I hurt him for trying to save our son. I'm a horrible mother, a horrible person." Tears streamed freely now, a river of pain and regret. "Don't say that, Clara. You were in a panic. Any mother would do the same. You didn't know. The important thing is Leo and Max. We'll find him. But right now the focus is our son. I'm taking the first flight back. I should arrive in about 6 hours. Don't leave his side. I'm with you." Tiago's words, though distant, were a small balm. They didn't erase her guilt, but they made her feel a little less alone. "Come quickly, Tiago. Please. I need you." She hung up, the phone still damp in her hands. 6 hours, 6 hours of agonizing waiting. She looked at the clock on the wall, the hours dragging like centuries. The image of Max, his desperate eyes, his mouth tearing the curtain fabric, replayed in her mind. He was the hero, the true protector, and she had betrayed him. Clara stood up, determination growing amidst the pain. She couldn't rest. She couldn't afford to completely break down. Leo needed her, and Max. She needed to find him, ask for forgiveness, bring him back. But first, Leo. She walked to the reception desk, her voice hoarse but firm. "Excuse me, I'm Leo's mother. Can I get an update?" The nurse, with a compassionate look, checked the computer. "He's stable, Ma'am. No significant changes. Dr. Mendez will be doing the next assessment in a few hours. You can go back to see him soon, if you wish." Clara nodded. Stable. It was a small word, but it brought a spark of hope. She would return to the ICU, to her son's side, and as she waited, she would make a silent promise to Max, that as soon as Leo was safe, she would do everything to find him and right the wrong she had committed. The night would be long, but Clara was ready for the battle. The word stable echoed in her mind. A fragile thread of hope she clung to with all the strength of her exhausted soul. She returned to the waiting room, but couldn't sit down. Restlessness propelled her, a nervous energy that prevented her from finding any kind of repose. She paced back and forth, the muffled sound of her own footsteps on the hospital carpet being the only soundtrack to her tumultuous thoughts. The clock on the wall was her silent tormentor, each tick a hammer blow to her conscience. 6 hours until Tiago arrived. 6 hours of loneliness, guilt, and fear. The image of Leo, so small and vulnerable, intubated, kept returning to haunt her. Her lips trembled. How could she have failed so badly? How did she not realize what Max was trying to do? The scene replayed in her mind like a horror movie. Max with his desperate eyes, the growl she interpreted as aggression, his paws scratching the curtain, and she, blinded by panic, by a mother's instinctive protection, hitting him, pushing him away. The pain she inflicted on him, physical and emotional, was now 1,000 times greater in her own heart. He, the hero, the savior, had been punished for her ignorance. "I'm an idiot," she murmured to herself, her voice hoarse, almost inaudible. "A horrible mother. How could I have been so stupid?" Tears, which seemed to have dried, began to stream again, hot and bitter, down her face. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, tasting the salt on her lips. It wasn't time to break down. Leo needed her strong. Max needed her to find him and ask for forgiveness. She approached the window, observing the darkness outside. The city slept, indifferent to her torment. The hospital, however, was a microcosm of life and death, of hope and despair. She saw an ambulance arrive, its lights silently flashing, and a new wave of patients being brought inside. Each face, each story, was a reminder of life's fragility. What would become of Leo? The doctors had spoken of long-term effects. The word hung like a dark cloud over her. Her Leo, with his particular world, his routines, his sensitivities. How could a brain or lung injury affect him? The idea was unbearable. She closed her eyes, trying to push away the worst-case scenarios, but they clung to her mind like parasites. "You're going to be okay, my love," she whispered, looking at the window as if she could see Leo through it. "I promise you're going to be okay." The promise to Max also burned in her chest. Where was he now? Scared, hurt, alone. The thought that he might be wandering through the night, with the pain she had caused him, was almost as excruciating as Leo's pain. He was part of the family, a loyal member who had sacrificed himself for them. She needed to find him. No matter what, she would bring him back. Hours dragged on. She tried to read a forgotten pamphlet on a table, but the words blurred. She tried to close her eyes, but the images of Leo and Max refused to disappear. Physical exhaustion was immense, but her mind was on high alert, unable to switch off. Finally, Dr. Mendez appeared in the waiting room, his face tired but professional. Clara jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. "Dr. Mendez? Any news?" He nodded, a small, tired smile. "Mrs. Clara, Leo is responding well to treatment. Oxygen levels are improving, and initial tests show no immediate brain damage, which is excellent news. It's still early to talk about long-term effects, but the prognosis is cautiously optimistic." A sigh of relief escaped Clara's lips, so deep it seemed to come from her soul. "Thank God," she murmured, her legs weakening. "He's a strong boy," the doctor continued. "We'll keep him sedated and intubated for a while longer to ensure lung recovery, but we are optimistic. You can see him again in an hour if you wish." Clara nodded, tears of relief now mixing with those of guilt. Optimistic. It was a word she hadn't dared to hope for. A small window of light opened in the darkness. She started walking again, but now with a firmer step. The guilt was still there, heavy, but the hope for Leo gave her strength. She looked at the clock. Tiago would be arriving in a few hours. She wouldn't be alone anymore. The night would still be long, but Clara was no longer just ready for the battle. She was determined to win. For Leo, who was fighting for his life, and for Max, who was waiting for her somewhere, a forgotten hero she promised to rescue. Dawn was approaching, and with it the promise of a new day full of challenges, but also of renewed strength to face them. The first rays of sun peeked through the high hospital windows, painting the grey carpet with pale shades of orange and pink. Clara felt the change in atmosphere, a slight relief from the oppressive darkness of the night. But the light didn't dissipate the fog of guilt and anxiety that still enveloped her. Dr. Mendez's word, optimistic, was a balm, but Leo's fragility, the image of him intubated, was still an open wound in her soul. And Max, oh Max, with each passing minute, the pain of having hurt and driven him away deepened. She walked to the window again, watching the city awaken. Cars began to move on the streets, people hurrying through their morning routines. The world outside went about its business, oblivious to the drama unfolding within those walls. She picked up her cell phone, Tiago's name still on the screen. It wouldn't be long now. His presence, even if it couldn't erase the pain, would be an immense relief. She didn't want to face this alone. Time seemed to stretch and shrink, an elastic torture. She tried to drink a glass of water, but her throat was dry, her stomach churning. Every noise in the corridor made her lift her head, hoping to see him. With each approaching step, her heart pounded, only to deflate when it was just a nurse or another visitor. Finally, about 2 hours after the last update, when the sun was already high and the hospital began to buzz with morning activity, she saw him, Tiago. He stood at the entrance to the waiting room, his eyes red and swollen, his hair disheveled, his beard unshaven. He seemed to have aged 10 years in one night. His crumpled jacket and backpack on his back betrayed his hurried journey. "Tiago!" Clara exclaimed, her voice choked, rushing towards him. He embraced her with desperate force, burying his face in her shoulder. His scent, familiar, comforting, made her break down. The tears she had held back for so long burst forth again, wetting his shirt. "Clara, my God, Leo," he murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion. She clung to him, feeling the weight of her own exhaustion and the relief of no longer being alone. He's in the ICU. The doctor said he's stable. The prognosis is cautiously optimistic, Tiago." He pulled back slightly, holding her by the shoulders, his eyes fixed on hers. "Stable? That's good, isn't it? Thank God." He took a deep breath, trying to control his own emotion. "And Max? Where is Max? Is he okay?" The mention of Max brought back the sharp pang of guilt. Clara shook her head, tears streaming again. "I don't know, Tiago. He must have run off. I hurt him, Tiago. I hit him. I pushed him away. I thought he was attacking Leo. I was so stupid." Tiago pulled her into another tight embrace. "Don't say that, Clara. Don't say it. You were in shock, in a panic. Anyone would have reacted that way. He was trying to protect us, wasn't he? What you told me. He tore the curtain to show the pipe." Her voice muffled against his chest. "Yes, he was trying to warn us, and I betrayed him." "No, Clara, you didn't betray him. You loved him. And he knew that. He knows. We'll find him, I promise. But right now the focus is Leo. We need to be strong for him." Tiago held her at arm's length again, wiping her tears with his thumbs. "Have you seen him today?" "No, not yet. Dr. Mendes said I can see him in an hour. Then let's wait together, and when it's time, we'll go in there, hand in hand, and show our son that we're here for him. And then we'll sort out the rest. We'll find Max. We'll understand what happened in that room. But one step at a time." Tiago's words were a pillar of strength. The guilt was still there, a tight knot in her stomach, but now she wasn't alone in carrying it. His presence was a reminder that they were a family, and they would face this together. She nodded, feeling a thread of hope strengthen within her. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Tiago," she whispered, her voice still weak. He squeezed her hand. "I would never leave you alone, Clara. Never." They sat side by side in the plastic chairs of the waiting room, their hands intertwined. The morning sun now flooded the room, and though the path ahead was still uncertain and painful, Clara felt a small but significant shift. The darkness of the night had dissipated, and with Tiago by her side, she was ready to face the new day and all it would bring. Sitting side by side, their hands intertwined, the silence between them was heavy, but not oppressive. It was a shared silence of pain, relief, and a tacit promise of mutual support. Tiago squeezed her hand, his eyes fixed on a distant point, as if he were processing everything. "So cautiously optimistic," he repeated, his voice hoarse. It's a word I didn't expect to hear. It's a miracle, Clara. After everything. Clara nodded, her tears dry on her face but her throat still tight. I know, I can barely believe it. He's a warrior, Tiago. Our little warrior. Tiago turned to her, his eyes red but full of deep understanding. Clara, look at me. You were acting on instinct. You saw your son in danger and reacted. There's no blame in that. None. Max knows that. He knows you love him. He's a dog. He understands. And we will find him. No matter what, we will bring him back home. The conviction in Tiago's voice was a balm to Clara's wounded soul. She leaned in, resting her head on his shoulder. I just want him to be safe and for him to forgive us. He's already forgiven you, Tiago whispered, stroking her hair. He's Max. He's loyal to the end. Now, let's focus on Leo. Afterwards, we'll get the house in order. We'll find out what happened with that gas pipe, who was responsible. But first, Leo. And then, Max. Time dragged on again. But this time, the wait was less agonizing. Tiago's presence was a shield against despair. They talked in low voices, recalling Leo's early days, the difficulties and joys of having such a special child. They shared the fear they had felt, the helplessness, and the small flame of hope that Dr. Mendez had ignited. Finally, a nurse with a gentle smile appeared at the waiting room door. Mrs. Clara, Mr. Tiago, you can come in. It's time to visit Leo. Clara and Tiago stood up, their hands clasping again. Clara's heart pounded, a mix of relief and terror. They followed the nurse through sterile corridors, the smell of disinfectant and medicines filling the air. Every step was an effort, every door they passed, a reminder of life's fragility. The nurse led them to a preparation room, where she handed them gowns, gloves, and masks. Please put these on. The ICU is a sterile environment. With trembling hands, they dressed, the formality of the medical attire adding a layer of unreality to the situation. When they were ready, the nurse opened a double door, revealing the pediatric ICU, an environment of soft lights, gentle beeps from monitors, and the constant whisper of breathing machines. Clara felt the air leave her lungs. There, in one of the beds, surrounded by a tangle of tubes and wires, was Leo. His pale, serene little face in sedation was almost unrecognizable beneath the oxygen mask and monitor pads. His small body was motionless, his chest rising and falling rhythmically with the help of the ventilator. Tiago squeezed Clara's hand tightly, his own face contorted with pain. They approached the bed, eyes welling up. Clara extended her gloved hand, gently touching Leo's forehead. It was warm. "My love," she whispered, her voice muffled by the mask. "Mommy and Daddy are here." Tiago leaned in, kissing Leo's small hand. "You're the strongest boy I know, Leo. Fight, my son. We're with you." They stayed there for a long time, watching every monitor movement, every small breath. The image of Leo, so vulnerable, so dependent on the machines, was heart-wrenching. But there was also an undeniable strength emanating from him, a resilience that filled them with fierce determination. When the nurse indicated that their time was up, Clara and Tiago said goodbye with more kisses and whispers of love. Upon leaving the ICU, the weight of reality returned, but with it, a new clarity. They had a purpose. Leo needed them. Max needed them. "We're going to get through this, Clara," Tiago said, removing his mask and gown. "For him, for us, and for Max." Clara nodded, feeling a knot of hope and determination tighten in her chest. The battle was far from over, but now they were no longer alone. They were a united front, ready to fight for their family, no matter the cost. Upon leaving the ICU, the air felt denser, the silence heavier. Clara and Tiago removed their gowns and masks in a daze, each movement mechanical. The image of Leo, so small and fragile, connected to so many machines, was etched into their retinas. They returned to the waiting room, but didn't sit down. Nervous energy prevented them from standing still. He's so small, Clara whispered, her voice choked, her eyes welling up again. I can't get that image out of my head. Tiago hugged her tightly, kissing the top of her head. I know, my love. It's horrible, but he's fighting. We saw it. He's strong. He pulled back slightly, holding her by the shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Now, we need to be strong for him, and we need to act. Clara nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Act how? I don't even know where to start, Tiago. First, Leo, Dr. Mendez said the prognosis is cautiously optimistic. That means there's hope. Our priority is to be here for him, to give him all our positive energy. Tiago paused, taking a deep breath. Second, Max, I can't accept that he's out there alone after everything he did for us. We're going to find him, Clara. I promise. I'll call Anna, the neighbors, the local police. We'll put up posters, whatever it takes. The mention of Max brought back the pang of guilt, but also a new wave of determination. I need to find him, Tiago. I need to ask for his forgiveness. And third, Tiago continued, his voice growing firmer, what happened at the house? That gas pipe. That wasn't an accident, Clara. Gas pipes don't just rupture like that, especially one that was hidden. Someone was negligent, or worse, someone did it on purpose. We need to find out who and why. Clara's eyes widened. On purpose? You think that? That someone tried to hurt Leo? The thought was so monstrous, she could barely form it. I don't know what to think, Clara, but we can't ignore it. The house is a potential crime scene. I'll call the police as soon as we leave here. They need to investigate. We need answers, and we need to ensure this never happens again. But what about the house and our things? Clara asked, her mind beginning to process the dimension of the problem. It doesn't matter now. Nothing matters more than Leo and Max and the truth. I'm going to the house today after I sort things out here. I'll talk to the police, see what they can do. You stay here with Leo. I'll call you every step of the way. You don't have to do everything alone, Tiago. He squeezed her hands again. We're not alone, Clara. We're a team. I'll handle the practical side, you take care of the emotional side, and we both take care of Leo. And together, we'll bring Max back. I'll call my brother. He has some contacts in the police. We'll start there. Tiago's determination was a beacon in the darkness. Clara felt a renewed strength, a flame of hope that ignited in her chest. The pain was still there, uncertainty lingered, but now there was a plan, a direction. They had a clear purpose. Thank you, Tiago, she whispered, tears of gratitude streaming. Thank you for being you. He smiled faintly, a tired smile but full of love. Always. Now let's get some coffee, and then I'll start making calls. One step at a time, Clara, one step at a time. They headed to the hospital cafeteria, the silence between them now filled with the promise of action. The battle for Leo was far from over, and the search for Max and the truth about the gas was just beginning. But for the first time in many hours, Clara felt she was no longer adrift. They had a rudder, and they were ready to navigate any storm. In the cafeteria, the smell of strong coffee and pain de queijo, cheese bread, was a strange contrast to the sterile environment of the ICU. Tiago ordered 2 black coffees, and Clara accepted a glass of water, her hands still trembling slightly. They sat at a corner table, away from the bustle. I'm going to start making calls now, Tiago said, pulling his cell phone from his pocket. First, my brother. He always knew how to get things done. Clara nodded, watching him dial. Tiago's voice, though tired, carried an authority she hadn't heard in a long time. He quickly explained the situation to his brother, his voice low but firm, detailing the gas incident and the need for an immediate police investigation. Clara overheard fragments. Yes, at the country house. The gas pipe was exposed. Max saved us. Leo is in the ICU. We need someone reliable to investigate thoroughly. As Tiago spoke, Clara closed her eyes for an instant, the image of Leo in the ICU returning forcefully. The small body, the tubes, the mask. It was a sight that would haunt her forever, but now, mixed with the pain, there was a growing anger. Anger at what happened. Anger at the negligence, or, as Tiago suggested, at the possibility of something more sinister. The idea that someone could have done that on purpose, with the intention of harming her son, was a poison that began to spread in her chest. It was a thought so monstrous that she refused to fully accept it, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Tiago hung up, his face tense. He's going to pull some strings. He'll call a friend at the police station there. Told me to go to the house and wait for them. Don't touch anything. Are you going now? Clara asked, her voice almost a whisper. Yes. The sooner, the better. But first, I need to try something about Max. He dialed again, this time for Anna, the closest neighbor. Anna's voice, on the other end of the line, sounded worried. Tiago explained Max's situation, asking her to keep an eye out, ask other neighbors, maybe even spread the word in local groups. He's hurt, Anna, and he's a hero. We need to find him. Clara felt a tightening in her heart as she heard Tiago talk about Max. Guilt was still a sharp knife in her chest. I need to find him, she repeated more to herself than to Tiago. I need to ask for his forgiveness. Tiago ended the call with Anna, promising to stay in touch. He turned to Clara, his eyes red but filled with unwavering determination. I know, my love, and we will. But for now, you stay here, with Leo. I'll go to the house, see the police, and then I'll start looking for Max. I'll call shelters, veterinary clinics in the area. I'll put up posters. We won't give up. He stood up, grabbing his car keys. I'll call you every step of the way, Clara, with every update. No matter what happens, you're not alone. We're a team, remember? Clara stood up too, hugging him tightly. Tiago's scent of sweat and exhaustion was an unexpected comfort. I love you, Tiago. Be careful. I love you too, and you, be strong for us, for Leo. He kissed her forehead, a lingering kiss, full of unspoken promises and fears. She watched him leave the cafeteria, his figure receding down the hospital corridors. Loneliness returned, but this time it wasn't overwhelming. There was a plan. There was hope, and there was a new, cold determination to uncover the truth. Clara picked up her glass of water, feeling the ice on her fingers. The battle was far from over, but now she had a clear purpose. She would return to the waiting room, to wait for Leo and to wait for news from Tiago. The storm still raged, but they were navigating. Clara returned to the waiting room, but didn't sit down. The hospital's quietness, once suffocating, now seemed an emptiness she needed to fill with action. Her eyes scanned the corridor, imagining Tiago in his car, driving back to the country house, to the epicenter of her nightmare. The thought that he was going to a potentially dangerous place alone tightened her heart. She picked up her cell phone, her hands still damp from the cold water glass. There was nothing she could do but wait. Wait for news of Leo, wait for news of Tiago, wait for Max. The word wait felt like an unbearable burden. Time dragged on. Every minute was an eternity. She tried to focus on her breathing, on her own heartbeat, but her mind wandered. The image of Max, rushing to Leo's bed, tearing the curtain, the sight of the exposed gas pipe, the dog's heroism, her blindness, guilt was an open wound. Suddenly her cell phone vibrated in her hand. It was Tiago. Clara answered on the first ring, her voice choked. Tiago, are you okay? Did you get to the house? Yes, Clara. I just arrived. The police are already here. My brother acted fast. His voice was tense but firm. They're cordoning off the area. It seems the pipe was indeed sabotaged. It wasn't an accident, Clara. They confirmed it. Tiago's words hit Clara like an electric shock. Sabotaged. So someone did this on purpose, to hurt Leo. The idea was so monstrous, so cruel, that she could barely breathe. It seems so, my love. They're investigating. They'll take samples, look for fingerprints. It's a crime scene. Tiago paused and Clara could hear the sound of wind in the background, perhaps the wind at the country house. But before all that, Clara, I have some news. Clara's heart pounded. What? What happened? Is it Max? Yes, Clara, it's Max. Tiago's voice was laden with an emotion Clara rarely heard. He was here, near the house. Anna, the neighbor, found him. He was injured, but alive. She took him to the emergency veterinary clinic in town. A wave of relief and gratitude swept over Clara, so intense that her legs gave way and she had to sit down. Hot tears streamed down her face. He's alive, thank God. Is he badly hurt? Anna said yes, but the vets are taking care of him. He has some deep cuts and is exhausted, but they think he'll recover. He's a fighter, Clara, always has been. I need to see him, Tiago. I need to go there. I need to ask for his forgiveness. Guilt, though still present, now came mixed with overwhelming joy. I know, my love, and you will. But first, Leo, I'll go to the vet clinic as soon as I'm done here with the police. I'll see Max, and I'll call you with all the news. You stay with Leo. He needs you. Clara nodded, even though she knew Tiago couldn't see her. Okay, Tiago. Keep me updated on everything. I promise. Now, I need to go. The police are calling me. I love you. I love you too, and thank you, Tiago. Thank you for everything. Clara hung up, her cell phone still trembling in her hands. Max was alive. Max was injured, but he was being cared for. A part of her heart, which felt like it had been torn out, now began to heal. And the anger at what happened at the house, the determination to find the responsible party, only intensified. A few hours later, Dr. Mendez appeared in the waiting room. His face, though still serious, bore a slight smile. Mrs. Silva, we have good news. He opened his eyes a little while ago. He's still weak and sedated, but it's a very positive sign. He's fighting, and he's winning. Clara felt a cry of joy form in her throat. He opened his eyes, yes, and he called for you. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The battle was far from over, but they were winning. Leo was fighting. Max was alive, and the truth about what happened at the house would be uncovered. Clara rushed to the ICU, her heart pounding. Upon seeing Leo, his blue eyes half open, fixed on her, a faint smile on his lips, she knew they would get through this, together, as a family, and Max, the four-legged hero, would be there waiting for them. The storm hadn't completely passed yet, but the sun was beginning to rise on the horizon, promising a new day.